Hello everybody and welcome to day 14. So quick note for those who follow on YouTube and maybe don't follow the website. I don't think anybody actually really looks at the notes in the description of videos, but whenever there is a substantial enough amount of scripting or anything like that that requires transcription or availability, in any video, I normally add the breakdown and script available and so on to the post that announces the YouTube video, and that's on the website for Call to Free. And what that takes you, so it's always going to be in the notes, and what that takes you to is basically these monospace, and this is probably going to be minuscule given the downscaling and all of the stream, but don't worry. So if you ever want to actually read the text in a, in an actual text resolution and not compressed by the video and everything, they're always going to be available like these. Normally I clean them up and add a couple notes before sending them out, so they're going to be commented with doc strings and stuff like that. But that's pretty much all that happens. I don't change the functionality. I mostly use them to make available what was done during the stream. So with that said, I'm also like pushing them to GitHub, but I'm not really using GitHub other than having reserved the name and having like kind of a test repository on it, so don't rely on that. Just check the posts on the website. Now we are going to do a little bit of transplanting surgery today. So over the last few days we've accumulated some useful lines. Day 11 we actually had the callbacks. On day 12 we had the Open Maya 2 lesson, I guess, for the FKIK switch, so the various bits we needed, which is not a lot. Day 14 yesterday for me is pretty much where we did all of the grunt work. Now between yesterday and today I have actually allowed myself to do the tiniest bit of offline work on these, practically nothing, just because it's boring stuff to do on stream. But what I've done, because it's worth noting, is I've decided, in an attempt to actually get to finish the callback today, I've decided to streamline things a little bit, made sure that I have what I need. I'm not gonna do, relatively complicated graph walks to find values like I normally would. So what I've done, it's something that I mentioned we could have been doing, is instead of getting the blended rotation, I am actually getting myself the two IK rotation and FK rotation separated, so we don't need to figure out which is which. We always have both available. We can just use whichever of the two we want. This is the offset of the staff, which is unaltered. It stays as it was before. And the other thing I've decided not to do is, again, to avoid walking the graph and doing weird things. Well, not really weird, but as much as unnecessarily complicated, is I'm going to just grab myself the controls that I want to affect directly. And go out to respectively the rotation of the staff, which we said is pretty much all we needed to do. So for the FK match, that's the only parameter that we're actually considering. And for the pedal, I am grabbing the translation, because that is all we're going to be setting. So that's purely in an attempt to, well, not really an attempt, I mean that's purely to streamline what we're going to do with this. Now charcoal is a pretty big upgrade from my text editing, but since we're going to do a lot of side-by-side work in transplanting the stuff we have, I have decided to use PyCharm to do the hack and slash job that we have ahead of us. Now bear in mind, actually, let me show that I have changed some of these names, but they're all pretty simple, and I've repurposed one of the inputs we have, and I've added one, and I've renamed both. So I also have some notes to that effect on another monitor, just to avoid like going and hunting for silly things. Now let's get on to the actual transplanting. So, and hopefully we'll put this in callback form very soon. Now, something that we know we have that is interesting is this attributes dictionary, which is basically all the attributes we're caring for The rename ones, which I am stealing from my notes, is going to be that. Nothing particularly weird about that or particularly worth it, no. So this is going to be, sure, settings, attributes. Not great naming, but whatever. I'm sure it'll serve. As usual, chat, I rely on you to tell me if things get too, we're moving too fast or something. I don't think that's been the case in the last few days. And then, now, the other thing that we might have liked is each selection, but in callback form, we don't quite need that because, yeah, sure. This is another thing Charcoal does that Maya doesn't seem to do, which is reloading your scripts when you want to. Which is quite convenient for execution, is we're iterating the selection to find something. You know, don't really care for that, but we are gonna get ourselves a quick get object just to retrieve the M object. Now, just a prototype for now. The next thing we want to transplant after we have the blend rotation is from a previous day the actual anatomy of a callback, and we're actually going to talk very briefly about scopes. So we were using these for callbacks, and if you don't remember, or if you're tuning in late and you just know half of the story so you don't want to catch up the previous streams, this is one of the simplest possible callbacks, which is going to be added as add attribute message change callback, and it takes the actual message, which is going to flag what Maya is doing and therefore whether you want to catch it or not. 2056 is when an attribute value is being changed, then the plug being affected, the plug communicated with the plug being affected, if there is one, which is not our case. That is when you connect the plug to another or something like that. So it's for different ways to affect attributes than we care for. And this is either the payload or the status. I don't remember, but I'm not really using it. So, in these actual regards, the next thing we want to do is we're interested in one value Maya, which is when FKIK switch actually changes. And I'm wondering, because I was actually messing with this scene a little bit. So yeah, there might be a callback installed here. Let me just remove that. I was just making sure that I wasn't doing anything stupid. So to remove that, we would actually want remove callbacks for everything selected, either selection we like. Let's go for that. And if you're wondering, like, all I did here, which is what you're seeing here, is making sure that I was validating the right names and everything. Scope retention as well. And that should now have removed everything. Yep. Mostly just didn't want to waste people's time. So, do we care for that? We actually sort of do care for that. So let's grab them from here. And there you go. So, okay, I didn't think I had saved it, but I clearly did. Let's reopen these just in case. Alright, so back to this. So we want remove callbacks. We want to do that. So let's be a little bit more explicit about it. Now, next thing we want to do is get ourselves some of the work we're doing. Now we have a lot of stuff like point from plug source and so on. Don't necessarily care for that, but we do care about, so in commands import map, we do care about, oh, I've replaced the callback I put in. Yeah, the crosstalk between the two editors can be dodgy, so, well, not really dodgy, but can get you in unexpected places, so be careful about that. Now let us start by installing a callback that tells us if our attributes are correct. Now, one thing that I reckon is worth noting here is when you run a callback like this, so when you have a function like that and you are in Maya script editor or in, in Charcoal or whatever you're using, if you call functions that are outside of that callback, you will mostly be fine. We've actually done it, I think, in here, we're doing it a lot. We're calling all kind of stuff that was outside of that function. And the callback is resident. And Maya only uses one Python interpreter for most of the session. So everything might seem like it's working, but the problem with something like that is that when you isolate just your callback, then you're not copying from somewhere else all these additional functions, and you install that callback. Well, if they're not available when you install the callback itself, because you're maybe doing it from a text file, obviously just plain not gonna work. But the main issue is that if this callback is actually referencing the implementation of a function that comes from somewhere else and that is not retained in some local scope, and then let's say that it's coming from this script editor and I change this implementation for something else I was doing, these callback might actually be affected and you might get weird bugs. So despite some Python books telling you never define a function inside a function, so we're inside a function here for the callback. Some people say, oh, never do something like that, function inside function. Well, tough luck. I mean, we kind of have to, because the argument for the callback actually wants a function and that's all it takes. So we will have to do that. Now, with that out of the way, that means that we're still going to do it this way to actually test things, but then we're going to rejig everything back into the single function. Sorry, need more caffeine. Next, we had some name checks that we do care about a great deal. There you go. So we do care for that. And that should be a constant. I mean, the setting attributes probably as well, but so we do care for that. Now, what we want to do when the callback is installed is, well, we want to install it on the right node, obviously. So hopefully we don't need to check for this attribute in and of itself. But we definitely do want to take that plug, and that means that we can do plug1 equals that name. Obviously that's not the syntax. Now I'm gonna keep borrowing back and forth, so hopefully that will make sense of why we did some of the work we did. You can see the various pieces coming back together. So question, couldn't you just package up your use functions and import them so they will be in scope? Yeah, you can do a million different things. It's not a hard problem to solve, it's just something that you need to be aware of. It's the usual thing where you go like, Python gives you this giant melting pot of cross scopes and the LEGB rule to go back and forth. It's very generous in how it always finds everything, but it also means that it's a very side effects heavy language. So long as you're aware of it and you make sure that you're fine, that you have everything available, you're fine. You're not gonna have any issues really. Just need to know about it. And yeah, you could choose to actually even like grab those functions, toss their implementation in a dictionary, and that practically, like if it does the actual full implementation instead of binding to the actual object itself, you manage to make it dereference and all of that. You can toss around the dictionary of implementations. It's not uncommon to do things like that. It's more Python than Maya, I guess. So, but it's actually really simple. I mean, for something like this, there's no real big cost in having some function definitions in here, and we're trying to go from easy and escalate up to, you know, trickier solutions. So for now I'm just suggesting the simplest possible way to do it. So plug one. Now what we are gonna get in here is well, what we are actually interested in getting. Okay, I might close this for a little bit. So what we're actually interested in getting is this plug, and we're interested in listening to that one. And then for this one, we'll actually look at the sources, which is why we might have had the source plug name in there for other items. So partial name, include no name false, use all is false. That's what we want. So plug one partial name. Equals that. That's what we want. So most common case. Do we have that as a verb? Yes, we do. Now Maya is going to run this callback on pretty much all the plugs when attributes change. The callback is per node. So what is going to happen is whenever attributes are changed in here, it's always going to like ping that callback, and that's why you need to do your filtering to the relevant attribute inside the callback. And that's what we're doing here. So do bear in mind that you might get any plug in there. That means the first thing we want to do is like, if it's not the right message, then we don't care. And that's the end of the story. If it's not the right plug, then we also don't care. We could merge those into a single if, which is probably the better thing to do, but for now let's keep it that way. It's probably more readable. Now the next thing we want to do is get the value of that. We know it's a bool, so what we could do is if it's false or 0, it's switched to fk. It means that isFK is plug1 dot as, oh come on, dot as bool, and is ik is not is fk. So that tells me what I want. Now the next thing to do for something like that will be, well, probably logging, making sure we're not doing anything stupid. Let's move on for a little bit and see what we can get out of it. So in our previous implementation here, we actually did do okay work. We have what we want there. Now the next thing we want to do, we have a lot of validation stuff here that we don't quite care about, because in this case we're installing a callback. So, you know, we better, like, the logic for validating whether it's the right object or not should be where you install the callback, not in the callback itself. Otherwise you're never going to get out of it. Now, this still seems a sane enough thing to do. So getting the attributes from the dictionary. So it also means that we want that, we definitely want that inside the scope of this function, and we don't want to sorry, we don't want to edit a shared object because anything could happen at that point. Now if this being Python, you could have had that bug and probably you would have never noticed for a long time, unless you were on Python 3K and you had some async stuff. But what was going on there is that these being outside the function, it was in the global scope. We still had access to it and we could have done work with it. And every callback running, let's say we have more than one of these callbacks, would have basically modified the same dictionary. Now, when you're single-threaded and you have no option but being single-threaded in Python, you don't really run any risk, because every callback is practically gonna do the work in that dictionary and then move on. But if you write to a shared resource, that's the most common multi-threading problem, and that in C or C++ or whatever you want, actually happens a lot, is something that you should be careful of. So anything like this, localize it to the scope as much as possible. Whenever you want to write to something, unless you explicitly mean for that thing to be a shared state, localize the scope as much as possible. Now, find plug, each plug name, false, attributes plug name, so that should still be fine. Do we have the right names? Yes, we do. So, the next thing we're doing was validating. No, because we're going to validate the object. We were declaring a bunch of things, which is blended rotation. Some of that we don't care for any longer. We also had matrix from plug. We're not going to deal with the matrices. Now, we did care about finding the offset of various items. So, let's do something here. If we want to switch from IK to FK, the IK will produce a rotation in the actual IK rotation input, which is straight up just what we need for the FK. So that's the simplest case. So we could do, oops, if is IK, which means that we have taken this plug and that is fine to be shared like that, because we're not writing to it, we're just reading it. You could probably even make this constant. Eventually, if you want everything included in the one function, that should also move in there. But anyway, so if is IK, then literally all we want to do is grab the IK rotation and grab the value for that. And there should be nothing else to it, really. So let's try that. What we want to get is, what have we called these setting setters? Get blended rotation. No, we want to get the IK rotation. So actually we're saying, no, sorry, I'm lying here. We're saying we want this to work when we switch. So in that case, it's if is FK. So when we switch to FK, we want to grab the, no. Okay, let me deconfuse myself for a second. If we switch into FK, we want to set the IK. If we're, we want the blend, so we want the previous part. Sorry, I had to think about it for a second. So what we actually say that we want is, in a case where we move these, the idea will be that we are in this state where it's FK and we want an auto switch, so that when we switch to this, we can pick up in a continuous fashion from where we're coming, which means that we will want to, when we go to IK, we will want to first find the FK, match the IK to it, and that will be it. Do we want, you can do it both ways, really. I mean, you could match either way, but this is the most logical thing at this point, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we want to show implementation. So yeah, what we do is, when this parameter is being switched to IK, we want to read the FK and alter this so that it actually moves there and matches things, so that we get this continuous switching, and vice versa. So the FK case is the easiest, which means when we are switching to FK, we want to read the IK. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Sorry, I had to chase my tail for a second of that. So we're going, if is FK, then we want to get the IK rotation as radians, which should be pretty straightforward. And yeah, we can use angle like these. Let's start with an angle equals 9 in case we want to use the same variable in both. And then pretty much all we need to do is, in this case, we get it from the IK, we look at the FK control rotation X. This seems entirely too easy, but let's try it. We'll look at that plug and we set that plug source. So if we get the source plug for that, should be so FK source plug, and it should be a single angle. If we link things right, then we should be able to do settings, adders, get IK rotation, source. Well, remember, we're actually interested in the plug. Obviously, we want the FK control rotation X. So what we're doing here is we're looking at FK control rotation X, and this is just a message. What we should have done, well, what I have done off stream, but what you will need to catch up to is we are linking the plug that we actually want to affect, which is going to be the source for this message. So this is how we're tracking our resources. And then we know that to be an angle, which I think can be set as double just fine. But we could actually have a look at the documentation for that. So let's pull it up. What we're interested in is plug. We don't care for the C++ API. Sure, take away exit words. Don't care for that either. So the first one should be what we need. So as is how you get something. What we care for is set M angle. We'll probably take a double. This might be a game. Oh man, that's scroll wheel madness. So set double, value float. And yeah, that's so we could use set M angle. Let's see, does it require an M angle? Yeah, it wants an M angle, which might not be bad because it means we have one less step here. So we could get the angle right away, and for this one, get the source angle, set M angle. What's the syntax of that? Set an angle like that. Sure. Capitalization is right, and we should be able to do that. Now that looks pretty much what we needed. So sorry, I had to jump a couple pages here and there. Let me catch the stream again. So no questions yet. Hopefully this still makes sense. Now remove callbacks from selection. Let's go back to what we had here. This seems like it's been entirely too easy so far. I'm sure there's going to be some syntax errors, some silly things like that. But let's try it. We could actually do let's do it in the right names. For each mob in ether selection, we want to let's actually do that first. So we remove all callback from selection, and then for each mob we install this callback. I still have this like, oh, there you go. Mistake number 1. So for each plug name, MFN dep is not being set. I can't believe I'm actually catching this before. That will be the node. So MFN dep is what we were calling our dependency node. Is OM2 MFN dependency node. And what we care for here is the functor attached to the node that the plug is on. So plug 1, oh come on, plug 1 is going to be here because we're looking at the FK switch. So if we take the plug object and we go .node, we will actually get these, and we can attach an MFN dependency node to it, which is a functor for all dependency nodes. Variable in function should be lowercase. Oh, I need to turn the linter off. It drives me insane when it suggests silly things like that. Typo in Word, rotex, man, overzealous. So overzealous. Actually, I think I have some auto-saving bisnani going on here. Should still be okay. And I am gonna use just the plain script editor for these. Now we have these. I think we are doing all we need. We might want to, we're actually setting as well. You can just alt enter over any warning and we show the dialog to ignore. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm a PyCharm noob. I just finished configuring a bunch of things for it this morning to make it bearable for me. Because there's no, there's not really a lot of like good editors for Python other than a couple options. If you want an ID. Anyway, so I have this sneaking suspicion that this seems to be too easy. So it's installed the callback. Let's move that out of the way. Is it really going to be this simple to do the first one? It's trivial, but... So, okay, it's not doing anything yet, which is, in a way, it's almost reassuring, because I was not expecting it to be this easy. I don't trust, never trust things that work first go, ever. If something has just worked, it means you have a bug that you haven't caught. So, let us suffer through the Maya default Python script editor and debug us something. So add attribute, each mob, CB. Let's make sure that we are doing everything. Okay, I've installed it on nothing, but let's have a look. So I should have installed it on these, and I should be getting some spam of sorts. Yep, so okay, the callback is installing. If I change this value, you can see that it is doing magic, and it's just printing something right now. Let us remove the callback from it so we don't get a spam. Now, that away. So if not, plug one partial name, and so, oh, okay, no, it should be okay. So if not that, otherwise, let's also... So if you're an inexperienced developer / programmer, whatever, this is probably going to look normal. If you're an experienced developer, you're probably cringing at the lack of a debugger. And so am I. So this is fine. We're also getting the right plug. Let's make this a little bit more readable. So this is printing the plug I have, which is good. We're not removing after installing. Now we're doing the right thing there. Okay, moving on. What do we have next here? Setting actors, which should be okay. MFN dependency node, plug node, ether keys. Let's also make sure that we are doing the right thing here. So yes, we're also finding all the right stuff. I must be doing something really silly somewhere because we're in a pretty good place here. Oh. Nah. FK source plug equals setting actors, FK rotation X. So I suspect that is FK plug one as bool. Oh, I've inverted his FK and his IK, haven't I? I suspect I did just that. So his FK means that plug one as bool equals false. That is what was going on. So we were actually probably pretty close to doing it right first go. So I'll just rerun the lot. We're printing a bunch of stuff still, so let us look at that. Yeah, I'm printing a bunch of stuff here. So let's make sure that we do enter these. Print is FK and print is IK. So make sure that we come from the right place and we go to the right place. It might also be when the callback fires, which is what I was mentioning yesterday. How are we doing in time? Oh man, I hope we actually get to finish this callback today. So there you go. I switched to IK now and I got... So I switched to FK and I got true false. and I switch to IK and I got true false. So this is not what I want. What am I doing here? So obviously, oh yeah, of course, I'm not printing unless this is, so we are getting it here. So let us see if we get as far as the angle. We might just not be setting the right thing. So we are printing the angle, and that is cool. So if I keep, like I'm using the virtual slider. If you don't know it, you mark something and you middle click left and right to change the value. So if I switch right, if I slide right, which sets it to IK, we're not calling anything. If I switch, if I go left and switch to FK, this is happening, so it's good. Now, obviously, I'm just not setting this right, and that must be it. So let's, this is a bit puzzling, but print both angle and print FK. Yeah, I was trying to autocomplete, not gonna happen. Print FK source plug and print FK source plug dot as an angle. Let's see what we get. Horrible debugging. So rotation X 072. I wonder if I change, like if I connected something the wrong way around. It's not impossible. IK rotation, IK pedals localize, and so on. FK source plug. Chat, do you see anything blatantly wrong with these? Because it seems convinced that they are, unless I'm printing something wrong, which is very possible. So let's move this one up. So this is the IK rotation angle. Is plug 1 correct? I came in late, I can't tell. Yeah. Plug 1 is literally just us ensuring that it's FK IK after. So that should be fine. FK rotation, IK rotation. This is angular values coming, unless the blend is going wrong or we're pulling too early and there's no change somewhere, but that really should not be the case. So we're printing angle, which is going to be the IK rotation, but print plug 1 as bool and see if it changes. Now we were printing is FK and is IK, so we were entering that right, but let's do it. So is FK and is IK. We should probably call this switch to or something like that, but so this should remove all existing callbacks, install the new ones, and all that jazz. Now let's see. So this is going false true for is FK is IK when I go to IK, and it's going from false true to true false on second run. Now the thing that is happening here, if you look at it, is we're getting the same value for IK and FK. That is where we seem to have a bug. Either I made a mistake somewhere, which is very, very possible. So I have FK rotation, IK rotation. I'm trying to write FK source plug. Okay, where is... So this is the source. It almost looks like the source is being set, but it's being set to the wrong value. Oh, no. Were we negating perchance? Because these would be absolutely hilarious if I just set the two things at such angles that it looked like he was doing it wrong, but he was doing it right. So let's move that. And yeah, that, no, so no. So we're getting different numbers now. Now the funny thing is that before we were looking at extremely similar numbers and it was just sheer coincidence. that or something is going wrong with the update. Now I'm starting to suspect that the bugging alone is gonna take us to the point where we do not have a callback just yet at the end of this stream. So let us, okay, we know that we're doing this right. If is FK, which means we have gone to FK, then, so let's remove the, well, let's reinstall the callbacks. Because the thing is, I should be setting that, no, I'm not. So, all right, gotta find this one because it's driving me insane at this point. So the values are different, which is good, but they're not different the way I would expect them because they're both negative when these are clearly pointing in very, very different directions. So where we, my question now will be where we negating one of the two. It's very possible that we were. Let us also pin this stuff just in case. And are we in additive? Pin all nodes off, additive, sure. So if I graph these, I actually want the depth of 1 and that's it. And all I want is the output for these. So the IK pedals we were input rotate. My question will be, was I actually negating that? And I don't think I was. Well, I was using a negative weight, wasn't I? Yes. Okay, so number one, for these two things to match each other, we were going counterclockwise with one and clockwise with the other, and we, in the blend, we actually negate the one, so okay, that drives me slightly less insane now, because if it's FK, what we care about for the angle, let's work with doubles. That should work fine, and I should be able to just negate it right away. So that's going to be my IK rotation. Now, FK source plug, we want that, and that is fine. Let's try and be adventurous right away and go no, auto completion equal, sorry, no, set double. Will that work? Will that blend? Let's try that. What will happen here? Okay, much better. There you go. So here's the funny thing, like we were at such an angle that I don't know what the odds of that are. The numbers we're getting look exactly the same, despite the fact that there was actually a 56 decimal place difference probably, or possibly there might also be a bug with setting an M angle directly. We'll need to check that, but for now we're fine working and setting doubles. So now this actually seems to work. So only when we switch back and forth, so you can animate whichever way you want, and only when you are switching from one direction to the other. So, and we got to be careful with this because it might go either way. But when we're switching from one direction to the other, so if we set this 0. Now, when you use the virtual slider, you're gonna issue a lot of calls, so you kind of have to be careful. About the same as successful in navigating an asteroid field. I don't know what the odds of that would be, to be honest. Not great, I imagine. So if I switch this way without using the virtual slider, I'm not issuing a lot of spurious calls because it's not a UI move, and we get what we want. Now I could be animating in IK for a good chunk of time, then and with I mean the animator could be add-on animate. Now when it's time to switch to FK, if I bump these, to 0. That's a single call being issued, it goes out. And now I am happily in FK mode after having matched. Now the expectation is that if I switch to IK, it will pick up from where I left the FK, so we need to make the IK jump. That was a long time digging for something, so I suspect we had two things. One is like sheer coincidence, we had two things at such angles that it looked like we were printing the same value or an unchanging value when we're actually just having two very similar values. Two, we were not negating the IK, and we were negating it through the weights here, so the output of these needs to be affected the same way we're doing that. Taking shortcuts, sometimes it bites. And lastly, there is a possibility that as M angle will get to the right value as an M angle, but if you set M angle, maybe it wasn't working. I don't know. At this point, I think that this is a small amount of success. So, and it's also been working. So we switch to that, and then we do the rest of the magic for the IK side of things. Now we will also have to work a little bit on that virtue slider problem. That is, honestly, that is not unexpected. Just a sec. Callbacks can fire a lot when people interact with the UI. The UI is a very, for good reasons, the UI needs to feel smooth, which means it actually has a pretty high frequency. So it can and this is somewhat specific to booleans, they will under the hood probably be manipulated as floats will be, which means if you slide with control on or something like that, if you slide very slowly, it's probably going to stay false, and then switch off to true as you use the virtual slider. I would not be surprised at all if that was the case, which means you will get a lot of spurious calls, and at one point you're going to switch over, and you might have, if you do not account for that, you might have a lot of odd effects or synchronize things when you don't want to, and so on. What we can do is actually store internal values and go like, is it actually changing, and we only actually affect something as it changes. But let us not do that just yet. So we are saying that is IK is not is FK, so we know that if we implement an else here, we're going to be good, right? But I would suggest that since we've been doing something like that, you are a little bit more explicit and you actually go is IK. Now, if this was C++, we'd be looking at something different, like working branchless or making sure the branching works a certain way. Python being a gigantic amount of just a super switch statement with a ton of like jump table stuff and states doesn't really matter all that much. And for some reason, I also can't see white space. And that's actually not white space anyway. It's just suggesting me the indentation. So now what we want to get, if this is the case, it's being too smart. So the line switch is not like Eclipse. It tries to be very, very smart. I did not want it to be very smart. So in that case, we actually want, if it's IK, we're switching to IK, we are interested in the FK angle. So let's start from that. Now we are interested in the IK source plug. Now at this point, we are actually working with translations, which makes things a little bit trickier, but not a ton. As far as attributes go, we do have it there, and we call it IK control translate. So copy and paste, sometimes bad, sometimes good. In this case, if I typed it by hand, I think I would have forgot to switch these and I would have got an error. Okay, so we have the source plug. Now we did have, when we did the switch in script form, we did have to do a little bit of work. Now I also realized, and this is literally as I stopped the previous stream, I also realized that I was doing something superfluous, and that's why I've changed some of this. We could go, if we wanted more versatility in terms of setup, we could go for getting buffers and doing a lot of multiplications and things like that. But in this case, the way we have arranged the hierarchy and everything, this is a pretty straightforward situation actually, where, let me see, we do have this control, and we do have the offset, which we're interested in. And I was doing, that's in charcoal, but let's show it in here. And I was actually doing a little bit of useless work here, where I was getting the reciprocal of the cosine instead of the cosine, and then multiplying by the projected length. Because what I was doing, and I was saying this is only going to affect two quadrants, like it's only going to really work for two quadrants. What I was doing was a poor man inversion. But the way we have done this, actually, it turns out that we should be able to solve it pretty easily. I haven't tested it, but I don't know. I feel like it's going to be that easy, where we actually don't care to account for the offset, negating it, offsetting it like that right away. If we basically get, because this is in its position here, and the buffer that it's related to is there. So if we were to just get the values as we have them and describe a circle around there, this is probably a good time to bring up Mischief in transparent mode. So what I'm saying is, before we were looking at this offset here and applying it and doing all kind of stuff. Now, the IK control is actually offset from a buffer that is somewhere there. So if I take the sine and cosine as I've done them row, let me switch display toggle. So I've dual monitors. Unless I switch the Wacom to just one monitor, I get really odd scaling. Now I'm drawing things squished. So this is a terrible circle, but you get the idea. So if we just use the sine and cosine row as we're doing, we will get our transformation here. So we're actually doing a little bit of offsetting and stuff like that, but we don't really have that much of a need for it, because it turns out that if we get the circle here as is and we just then move it back up by the offset that we were using for the y, well, this is what I suspect will happen, but I'm quite positive it will be okay. Says before everything explodes. Then we should basically get something that rolls around the way we want it. Now, that has been horrible. Hopefully, with some visual indication of it, the next part will make more sense and will not be confusing. 50-50 chances, it could go either way. So what we want to do for that is, we're interested in XYZ. This part is fine. Now the part that is not, like, because we're doing these additional offsets and things, like this is unnecessarily complicated. So I suspect that if I get the math, well, not math, if I get the cosine of that angle and multiply by the projected length, and this is the part that I was talking about, I'm going to get this. Then what I want is, I have an offset that is going to be the negative x, pushing this down, and that's going to come from my guide pedals. If I actually negate that and I add it back in, I suspect that we're going to get this circle. So we're going to keep this multiplication, like order of operands. There's no need to enclose in parentheses, but it's not a bad idea to still enclose like these. These I reckon definitely unnecessary though, because that's a function call. And then I suggest, sorry, I don't know the projected length. And if you wanted to be like really retentive about it, you could actually do a little bit of work where you squared one and multiply the other, but it doesn't matter at this point. We're fine with something basic like this. Now, the next part we're interested in. Now, we did do some work to actually find the subplugs of a plug to create a point. Now, because we simplify the way we network and we look things up, we do not need to do that extra work, but we do need to set subplugs. So this code will be repurposed. If it's okay, then what we want to do is find XYZ. For that plug, actually, sorry, we find Z and Y. It bothers me that these are out of order. There you go. So this is of the source plug on children, so this is fine. And instead of source plug, what we're interested in is IK source plug, so we're not too far off. So we trade them children, we get this child. Now, this was setting something. Don't care for that. Don't care for that. Don't care for that. Blended rot. Don't care for that, because what we actually want is angle that we're getting from there. Projected length we still need to get. We were probably just looking at buffer before. I think we can actually lift that one. IK pedal offset endpoint from plug series. So actually, what do you know? We do need that. Because I think we're still working that way. We could just... Are we gonna be lazy? What does the chat say? Should we be lazy? Or should we do things properly still? So this is the staves, and we're connecting the lot, but the reality about it is that we were, I believe, just extracting the Y. If the chat is not going to say anything within 1 minute, I think I'm going to be lazy. I might actually be lazy anyway. So we're getting the point. The projected length was just the Y. We don't really have a use for anything else. We're a little bit bound to the component enough as is, so I think I am going to be lazy. Chat didn't say anything. Too late. Yep, I've just lagged. So we don't need to do all of this work now because we're gonna have one simple plugin there. And what we care for, actually, sorry, we do want to keep that because that's good. We don't care about PX, so that we remove. We do care about the pedal offset, so we should be able to, what do we want to use? This double is probably gonna do as good, except that we want to call it projected length. This might not be the best of names, because at this point we're straying a little bit. Chat was leading lazy by example. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Thank you. So we actually want to get that plug. Let's catch up to that. So we want to get the AK pedal offset, get the source, get it as double, as flow, as double. I think it will be the same here. Translate. So translate should actually be a K distance under the hood. So in theory, K distance is a double. Let's say we use that. Do we care for these at this point? No, we care for these later. Again, if you're a seasoned programmer, you probably know this, but if you're not and you're learning, it never hurts to have whatever you're using, variables, you know, pulls, yanks, and stuff like that. If you have them close to the point where you actually use them, rule of thumbs are kind of dangerous in a way, but it's not bad. Don't do the thing that people often do where you declare and initialize a million things and you only use them hundreds of lines later. It's silly. Keep things local in general. So, source plug child. Now let's not be hasty here. Let's try and do it once and do it right. Let's translate. So we're happy. We want to set the Y and we want to set the Z. So if we're in TY, then we get the AK source plug 1. So instead of as flow, because we're fetching before, we probably want to do set double. Now hopefully that will work, but we can set double Y and same here. Nope, no suggestions. Set double Z. So, how are we faring? Are there errors? Statement seems to have no effect. Well, that's a good point. Thank you, pie chart. This was actually a good one. MP. So I suspect the MP is my endpoint. I don't care for that. I actually don't care to catch that at all because I am setting the plug directly. I'm getting the child. This should be a plug and setting double. This seems like it could actually work, or at least get us something where the bugs are interesting enough that we'll learn something about what we're doing. What do people reckon? What does the chat say? We're rolling the dice. is it gonna work other than maybe spelling mistakes and stuff like that? Okay, if there is a spelling mistake, it's not super terrible. Now, I do have that, so if I now switch this to IK, I think it worked. So I was just not looking for anything specifically, but I think it actually worked. So if I switch it to FK, this should now have no effect. Well, it would because I actually move things around. There might be an offset here, it might not be great, or it might actually, so in theory this should now have no effect. Oh, that's interesting. So the negation of the angle is playing against us here, which is, that's kind of funny. So what is happening here is that the negation of the IK doesn't always work. We'll need to look at that, but I reckon that like for values that where that negation is not biting us in the ass, that might actually, nah, the negation is still doing funky stuff. But okay, we got the code to be bidirectional, so I reckon this is progress. We do need to clean up something. I might just have got something slightly wrong, possibly. I don't think I went that far when I was just testing stuff, so I probably don't have the recipe done. I might have to actually activate my brain and think about it. I wish I had done notes on this, but I did not. Anyway, so does what we have in so far make sense to you guys? I guess is the first question. Now the second question is, if we have switched, like we move the IK around and I put these, it might also be the loop, and I set these to IK. Yeah, that's the negation part. Maybe I did not. Did I? If is FK minus that. Oh, there you go. Is IK, yeah, copy pasta, bites in the ass. I was negating the FK as well, so I was getting a ping pong between the two. I was like, this doesn't make sense, it should work now. So we still have work to do, but, so what happens if I don't negate these? Because maybe I was doing something wrong before. Oh, actually, sorry. I do want to negate this, because what I have not done is reinstall the callback. I've modified it, but I haven't reinstalled it. There you go. So I'm gonna call it a win. Because, I mean, it's not perfect. We still want to address some cases. But what we have, functionally speaking, okay, now we are in FK. And let's say that the idea is the seamless switch. Still playing catch up on previous streams, but I'm following. We want the whole seamless switch thing. Now if we switch to IK, we've been animating in FK here, well, the animator has been, we don't animate, then I would say that I would expect this to go the other way around probably, because right now the FK has switched to the IK, but I suspect that that is my callback, like when I slide, being way overzealous. So it's firing off a lot more than it should. So let's test that. If I switch this to 1, no, I'm just switching things the wrong way around. No, that's correct, sorry. If I switched it to IK, so what happened is that my IK, before taking effect and now controlling this stuff, has jumped to the FK. So we've had a match. Now let's say that this is the point where the animator hands over from IK back to IK. I would expect to go in here, punch this to 0, and there you go, and see the FK match. So, okay, this is cool, this is working. Now, the part that is missing is what I was talking about is, let's see, if you are unfamiliar with virtue sliders, let's take something that I can, if you mark an attribute and you middle click in the viewport, you will get a change in that attribute. If you shift click, I think it's fast, and if you control click, no, sorry. If you, what? Okay, no, control is snapping me no matter what. Confused. I think in this case I'm actually not virtue sliding anything because it's a translation, so the other bindings take over. So let's do it with this. But if you middle click and you slide, you should see, like, might be super tiny, but you should see the mouse icon changing. Let's see if the chat is saying Alt. Now Alt is always taken over by my viewport. No, I'm pretty positive it's Control and Shift, and Shift is up a magnitude and Control is down a magnitude, order of magnitude. You can try it, it won't take you very long. So what I suspect is that these, we actually have everything working, because when you punch in the values at their edges, you're fine. What is actually happening is on virtual sliding this off to on, which, you know, you would expect these to be a binary change from 0 to 1 or from falsehood to truth. What is actually happening, and this might go a couple of ways, is this is possibly the virtual slider is actually operating this way, and there is a step curve in there that determines false and true. And so as you go and do these work, you're basically switching many times to FK and then many times to IK, which is why we're getting more hits than we want. The problem with that is that it might perform actions you don't want, because you want to jump to this state directly. You don't want to execute the false one so many times. So if you remember how we were doing cycles before, so, and let's have a look if that is the case. So if I see how, I don't know if you can see it, but right now my FK-IK switch is still off because I'm not sliding enough, and now it's on, but it's already sorted an effect because I am looking at the value instantly and deciding on that, right? So I'm going, looking at the value and going, okay, it's this value is false. Where is it? The FK, I can do it. The FK-IK switch is false, therefore I assume that I am coming from IK. Whereas if I do it the other way around, and if I set this to true, I'm saying, okay, this is true, therefore I assume I'm coming from the FK. Now, the issue with that, and we'll clean it up the next time, but the issue with that is that that assumption is kind of not the way it works. Because what we're doing is, we're going, okay, if it's true, I assume that before it was false. So act like the pedal is in this state here. And if you're false, then assume that before you were true. So act as if the pedal was in this state. But because there's this soft kind of interaction with virtual sliding, whereas what we expect is this stepped interaction, and the callback is fired many times as you virtual slide, we will want to catch the value and operate on when the value changes. Now, we have done an hour and 50 minutes. We have a callback that works, that despite having to work around one and just the one specific interaction model is fine. So I am gonna call it here, because for once, just for the once, I have been on time. Chat, we have a few minutes for questions, otherwise I'm gonna call it and actually go out for breakfast. Well, I think we have to drive somewhere first, but then I will have breakfast. I can't believe that we finally got around to doing the callback proper, and we have done it on time. No questions, no dubs. Is this even remotely interesting, actually? Trying to figure out how you crack the state without a global. You can't. So here's the funny thing. You don't have, like, the whole thing of, like, oh, don't use globals. They're fine. They're perfectly fine. But even better than doing the global is just you can store something on the node and switch that, which is equivalent to a global, just it's local to the node. So your callback needs to get a little bit more complicated, but it's fine. Like, that's the kind of thing that there's, like, when you write stuff like this, and I don't know where it comes from. It's some sort of intuition thing, I guess, where people think, oh, this thing is dirty, this thing is too complicated, surely there must be a solution, and it might be a bit of imposter syndrome. uh, there must be a solution and I'm not seeing it. um, there is a lot of stuff that is stateful and you cannot do unless you implement some sort of state, be it a global or be something on the object where you track the previous thing. So there are kind of tricks that you can use, and you can implement multiple callbacks to see before and after and stuff like that if you wanted it to be more stateless and wanted it to be more callback driven. But it is perfectly fine to have a second attribute where you track provenance, and basically as you get these value coming in from the manipulation of the virtual slider, you can practically treat it. If you store it somewhere else, you can practically treat it like something like this, right? You store the previous one, so your inflection is going to be like that. Now, at one point here, you're going to have two edges, which is kind of like having -0 and +0. And that is where your behavior will suddenly switch, which is where you want it to switch, real and proper, which is what we're not getting right now when you have callbacks. And you can do it by adding another variable and go like, am I coming for that value? Am I coming for that value until it actually switches? Because you're still limiting things to that node, you're looking at something that you own and all of that, it's fine. The same script that it will install our callback. So right now we're doing something super simple, right? We're just calling this, but we still want to validate that this is the right type of node, that we're doing things. That script can very easily be the one that adds your tracking attribute. And the remove callbacks will just remove that attribute if you don't want to have it. I don't think you'd end up using a callback on the node itself. Okay, so there's a couple of questions. Sonic, I don't think I quite get. I don't think you'd end up using a callback on the node itself. Let me know if I need to elaborate. I'm not entirely sure what you mean. But the other question is, what would be needed to make a blend instead of a switch? A blend is tricky. Like right now, we're literally doing a switch because very often the animator will, and I've done proper blends, and then the animators normally go, well, you know what, we actually want to switch. Everybody switches on once anyway, so whatever. Doing a blend for something like this gets a lot trickier because instead of having this continuous discontinuous state where you go, okay, there's a clear change where I can go from one to the other. If you were to use a blend, right, so if there's a switch, oops, not that one. If there's a switch, and this is my IK, and somebody goes in there and goes like, okay, I'm now switching to FK, please match it. Fine. Now, if let's get us back into the other situation. Oh, come on. So we're in IK. Now, if this was a blend, I hope you guys can see this. This might be murderous with the compression and everything, but this is where the control is. If this was a blend, now instead of switching from on to off, let's say I switch to 0.9, what would the animator's expectation be? That I move the FK control to do the matching, that I move it to something that represents 0.1 of this contribution and 0.9 of this, and then I also balance it, because if it's set at 0.9, you're blending things, you're basically doing something that is, you need to minimize somewhere, and some of it is invertible and some of it is analytic, so you can do it. But it's tricky because you're not going and switching from one state to another. You now have a gradient of change, and there's no real defined behavior for this. Okay, this has taken over, so I want this to match that, or this has taken over, so I want this one to match that. It's so fuzzy in between that there's no real easy behavior for you to choose. It's not that you can't do it mathematically, it's that the interface for that. You could agree with the animators going like, sure, I'm gonna do, whatever amount of blend you put in. Only when you stop moving that slider, because remember that if you support this, if you support the continuous movement, it's gonna bounce or minimize or switch, and then there's no real effect. You could go like, only when you release that slider, I will look at the rate of change and the chain of consequences and so on, and do something that is this. Chances are they're gonna hate it. So yeah, if you do automatic switches, it's best if they're switches. Doing automatic gradients is incredibly hard. Like the complexity literally goes up a ton, and interfaces is just not very good to deal with that kind of stuff. Any other questions? And I guess part of that is it falls under the umbrella of if you're not super experienced, you might think that you're just inadequate to something, you don't know the solution, you don't see the solution. Sometimes problems are just impossible. Sometimes problems are just impossible to present as an interface. There might be mathematically something you can solve, but can't coalesce into something that animators will actually use and like. It's a classic rigging problem. Rigs come out over featured because you try and do everything that an animator could possibly ever want, and then it turns out that it's so over featured they don't understand it. I'm sure anybody who's rigged is sort of familiar with that. Alright, I'm gonna give you 5 seconds and then call it. Well, I think we have a 10 seconds delay with the stream, so 10 seconds for now. Nice clean switch with matching will satisfy most animators, I will think. Yeah, I don't think animators can be truly satisfied. But it would make them less angry than having a blend. Over feature rigs, no, that never happens. Animators never say it'd be cool if. Yeah, I've never heard an animator say it'd be cool if. Normally they come to me and go like, you should really do this. I know better, I animate. I wish they use a conditional. Alright, it seems that we are at the natural end for these. We got a callback and it works. And I'm ecstatic about it. So I'm gonna post, I'm gonna maybe clean this up and comment it. Actually, it doesn't even need all the cleanup. I'm gonna, if you're watching this on YouTube, same thing that I said at the beginning, look at the description section for the video, and you will find the link to the actual transcription of what we've been doing. Alright, we are good. Thanks everybody for watching, especially if you are on the stream. You guys and girls are the salt of the earth. This will not be possible without you. If you're watching this on YouTube, I still love it. Maybe. So long as you watch regularly. Alright. Have a good day or night, everybody.